This is Standard Office Procedures, the podcast that helps professionals live and grow through culture, communication, and candor. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Standard Office Procedures. I am your host, Grace, and with me being inappropriate is Shannon. Say hi, Shannon.
Hi. What? I'm not inappropriate.
It was a little bit inappropriate. You guys didn't see it.
I was just licking my lip.
It was, sensually.
Oh,
Today we're going to talk about
great.
Networking and some things that you should and shouldn't do at a networking event, such as licking your lips and where that falls. So,
what if you're parched?
Then you have to have your emotional support water bottle, which we've spoken about off air. And guys, I just want to talk about that for a minute. If you carry a water bottle around a lot, I think you're very cool and you can hang out with me because
You're definitely hydrated.
yeah, you're hydrated. Gorgeous, gorgeous girls are hydrated. So Shannon, I have a lot of feelings about networking. Well, okay, here's the thing. I don't have a lot of feelings about networking.
You don't like the word networking.
I think I don't like what networking implies. Like, I think at its core, I understand that networking is connecting with people, right? Like, it's connecting with people and with kind of the purpose of, like, from a professional lens, right? And we'll talk all about, like, the benefits of networking, why it's important, and obviously how to do it. But I think that the word networking kind of puts me off because it seems almost disingenuous, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
it's very, like, salesy and, like, forced connections.
And, like, transactional.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to go and have conversations with people to see what I can get out of it.
One network, please.
Yeah, to see what they can do for me, right? Like, it's kind of this idea of, like, I want something from you. And something about that I think turns me off.
Well, you know, in MLMs and multi-level marketing, that's called, like, network marketing. And the idea is that they're using their network of friends and family that they know to make their network larger and sell to them. And so I think that's, for me, where, like, the yucky taste in my mouth comes from with the word networking.
Yeah.
But we were talking about this earlier. Networking in and of itself is really just talking to people and hanging out and getting to know them and talking about their jobs and, like, who do they know and stuff. But, like, from a purely just, I don't know, curious, fun connection standpoint, right? Did I do a good job with that?
You did a great job. No, you did a great job. No, I'm with you. I think that, again, networking kind of gets a bad rap because I think we also see it portrayed in media on shows like Entourage or Billions or whatever.
Yeah.
At Mad Men is like this kind of, like, sleazy, underhanded way of, like, I'm going to manipulate people into doing something for me. I'm going to go network, right? But in reality, networking is basically, it's making social connections from a professional vantage point, right? It's socializing, but with instead of doing it, like, you know, on our off time, we all socialize for the most part. Like, you know, I go to yoga, I see Shannon on the weekends, all these things that are kind of me in the capacity of Grace. I'm not wearing my professional hat. I'm off the clock. And then there's socializing where you're like, okay, I'm going to be my professional self and be on kind of my best behavior. And I'm going to meet other professionals, and that there can be all kinds of goals for networking. So let's talk about what those advantages are of, like, productive networking. So basically, networking is great if you're looking for a new job.
Oh yeah,
that's kind of the biggest one that I always think of when it's like, you know, it's I either want to move ahead in my career or I need a new career. It's good for meeting potential customers or clients. So if you're in a position where you're trying to sell or you're trying to grow your, I guess, network. That's a great way to do it. I know, I'm sorry.
Gross.
Filling job positions in your company. So again, finding talent. Growing your own business, meeting other businesses within your community. So local networking events are great if you're a smaller business, or even if you're a larger business and you're trying to get plugged into your community. Networking events locally are great for that.
I think it's a good way to keep you grounded.
It is. Yeah, that's a good point.
And get perspective.
It helps with your brand recognition, also with your credibility within an industry. You know, if your company, small or large, if you guys have a presence at networking events, also small or large, that helps other people see that you're present, that you're around, that you're involved and plugged in. It helps you better understand your community. Networking can also help you confidence, right? So if you are maybe a younger professional or, you know, a newer professional, getting out there and talking to other people in your field or even outside your field, other professionals, I often find that when I network, that word, it's like loath to leave my mouth. But when I network, I will surprise myself with how much I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree completely. The whole thing of building confidence, whether you have a ton of experience or a little experience, I think too, like, as we grow in our career, we get this imposter syndrome of, like, I'm climbing up the ranks, but, like, I don't really deserve to be here. I don't really know anything. And I have found, and I think you and I have both found, sometimes we go particularly to local events, or even I've been to big conferences where I was very intimidated, that, like, you know a whole lot more than you think you know. And everybody is kind of at the same level. Like, some people are super, super smart, but like in what area, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe in one area, whereas you know a whole lot in your area, you know, and you do match up. So even though networking can be very intimidating from that point of view, it's also very, I don't know, very validating and very uplifting.
No, I think that's a great point. I think it can be super validating. I love to talk about like that. My biggest thing was, so in our company, we're kind of we're a pretty lean company, right? We don't have very robust departments with lots of people. We have generally we have one person who's in charge of an entire like sub department.
Yeah.
And so I used to run our content department, and I wouldn't really have anyone but Shannon to kind of talk to about content marketing. And like Shannon and I were in this little island by ourselves, and we kept thinking like, God, we are so underqualified. Like we don't know what we're doing. We don't know what we're talking about, you know, because we're such a small company and we didn't have that many years of well, I didn't, Shannon did. But then I would talk to people who were outside of our company who had maybe 10 years of experience. And I'd be like, oh, we kind of know the same things. Yeah. Like I feel like I'm actually kind of up to snuff. So networking, while it can be daunting, can also be an incredibly validating experience, like you were saying. And also another benefit of networking, and this is my favorite one, is that you can make friends. Like, if you
honestly, that's just what I look at it like. Socializing, speed dating from a non-romantic lens.
That's really, I mean, that's really what it is. I think again, going back to the kind of the implications or what's the word I'm looking for? Like the associations that we have with word networking are not all deserved, because really it's just socializing.
The word is gross and the stereotype is gross, but there's a ton to it it's just people.
Yeah.
Just peopling. Just socialize it. Just peopling.
Gotta go out and people. But I think oftentimes too, we'll think, oh, I'm either good or not good at networking. Like, oh, I'm great at networking. Or, you know, the inverse of that is like, I'm just not good at it, so I don't want to do it. Or I'm scared of it. I don't know how to do it. Yeah. Or it's daunting. Or it seems like something that's like, again, for like business people in suits, like executives and stuff. Yeah. And that's not the case. And like so many other things that we speak about on this podcast, it is a soft skill. Yeah. So just to reiterate what a soft skill is, it's something that can be learned, right? It's things like confidence or, you know, orating, right? These things that are like, oftentimes we think like incorrectly, oh, I either am confident or I'm not. I either am a good public speaker or I'm not. Similarly, it's, oh, I'm either a good networker or I'm not. That's not true. You can completely flex and build those muscles, right? Like you can practice, you can start small, and you can become better and more comfortable at networking.
Yeah, I think there's something to like doing it your own way as well. And this is something I've learned here at Blue Summit Supplies with Owen, because I find I'm a little intimidated when I go do networking, like professional events with Owen, because he's so good at it. Yeah. And it's funny because he says he hates networking, but he's so good at he just talks to people and connects with them, and he's just so comfortable, and he asks a lot of questions. And people really like that. And so I kind of learned from him in that way of just ask questions. Like just, you know, you don't have to perform.
Nope.
You ask questions, they're the one performing. But I have learned from him there's a way to do it in my way. Like just because I think he's really good at it doesn't mean I have to do the way he does it. I can do it my way, but I can still learn from him in that way.
Yeah. And also, to be frank, like if you try to do it in someone else's way, it's not going to come across awesome.
No.
Like it'll seem insincere. You know, if you're trying to be somebody else because you think, okay, that's how somebody networks, I'm going to do that, I'm going to become that person, it'll come across as ringing insincere. It won't feel like you. And one thing that Shannon said that I really liked about, you know, how Owen networks and how generally people who are very comfortable at networking do it is they do ask a lot of questions. And they also, Owen is very skilled at steering the conversation. I don't think he does this on purpose, right? This sounds like manipulation, but I think it's just natural for him. And it makes sense. He's very good at steering the conversation towards topics he knows a lot about.
Yes.
And you can do that too. You know, if you're a creative and you're going to an engineering conference, you might be in trouble, right? But if that's happening, why are you doing that in the first place?
Ask a lot of questions.
Yes, ask a lot of questions.
Just have fun listening.
But if you are a creative and you're going to a conference of other creatives or, you know, marketers or whatever it is, there is a way to kind of finesse the conversation into alleys that you feel comfortable speaking about. Yeah. And when I say that you know a lot about it, I don't mean, oh, go ahead and dominate the conversation and dazzle them with your knowledge. I mean that if you steer the conversation into waters that you feel like, I know these waters very well, I'm very comfortable here, there's less of a chance that you'll be kind of like anxious.
I also think, you know, we've talked before about how people are scared of looking stupid because if they're, you know, if everybody's talking about something they don't know anything about, I think you come off looking very smart if you're like, wow, I don't know a lot about that. I'm curious and ask questions. Yeah. People love that. And you're learning, right?
it marks you as somebody who is humble.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
for the most part, like I really can't think of an exception here except for complete monsters, but like people are really drawn to humility, especially in a professional setting. I think because it's not super common, right?
Absolutely.
There's this idea at talking again about imposter syndrome, which we did a whole episode about. There's this feeling of like, if I let people know that I don't know everything, then I'll be revealed as a fraud, when that is not the case at all, because everyone is feeling that way. Everyone is aware. We're all aware of the fact that we don't know everything. We're not perfect, right? We're not amazing at our jobs yet. I mean, well, that's not true. We're amazing at our jobs. But we're not like at the pinnacle.
Right.
And so if somebody else says, oh, I didn't know about that, that automatic, like if it was me and I was talking to you, Shannon, I didn't know you very well, and I'm like, oh, wow, this woman really knows her stuff. She's very impressive. She's very smart. And then you say, oh, I don't know that much about content marketing. What about this? That would automatically make me like you more.
I think that's why Owen is so endearing to people, because he does just ask questions about things he does. And he's very open about, I don't know anything about this thing.
Yeah.
You know?
So tell me about it is what I'll say. Yeah. It's one thing to say, I don't know about that, and drop the mic and leave the conversation
or to
dead.
act stupid about it. Like, oh my gosh, I'm just such a silly girl. I just don't know. Oh my God. No, that's a whole different.
Setback feminism
but
20 years.
Some just grounded humility and just some open honestness about, wow, I don't know a lot about that. I'd like to know more, you know?
Yeah. And as for questions, so Shannon, you mentioned asking questions. That's kind of my go-to route when a conversation maybe is, fading out a little bit, or I'm not sure how to keep it going. And if you're somebody who you're like, okay, yeah, I get it, ask questions, but I'm not sure what questions to ask.
Yeah.
We've got a list of networking questions for you guys. You can check these out on our blog, at the blog post. I'm not just going to read out all of them, but I am going to touch on a few.
We're going to read some of them.
I'm going to read some.
I'm excited.
I highlighted my favorites. Look.
I was just telling Grace that I am going to an event here in a couple months that I'm kind of nervous about, because these people are very established and very intimidating, and I need to brush up on my networking questions.
Here's the thing. Shannon is also very established and intimidating, but you don't think that you are, which is the problem.
No, not at all.
Anyway, so these are some questions. So obviously you can go in with like, oh, what do you do? And, how do you like it there? And that's fine. But when that conversation runs its course, here are some things that you can pick up with next. So what part of your job do you enjoy most, right? I love this one because it's talking about, it kind of brings the humanity back into the conversation. It's not so much like, oh, what do you do? Like, let me reduce you to your job title. It's a bit more of like, what do you enjoy?
Yeah.
I like.
Or if there's something that, in a job, maybe it's an engineer or an accountant or a CEO, maybe that a little bit, be like, do you ever work with X or Y? Like if you do know a couple things that they might do, and just ask them, do I ever work with, I don't know.
I don't know anything about engineering, so fill in the blanks there yourselves, guys. But yeah, and then you can bring it back around to like, oh, do you like that? How do you like that? Is that, do you enjoy that? Another question is, what is your company culture like? I love this question for obvious reasons.
The director of culture.
I'm the director of culture. So I ask this question anyway, oftentimes because I find I'm really curious about it for other companies' cultures. Like, what is it like to work there? But that's always a really good one for starting conversation. Because oftentimes people aren't asked this as much as I kind of expect them to be. Because I'm so mired in the importance of culture and creating a great culture and et cetera, et cetera. And some companies take their cultures really seriously, but I think the majority of companies are still kind of catching up with this notion that culture is something that's intentional.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes they might be like, I don't know, I've never thought about that. And then it can lead to a larger conversation.
Yeah.
So that's always a good one.
That's a good example of steering the conversation towards something you know a lot about, because Grace knows a lot about company culture and creating it and nurturing it. And so that would be a good way for her to kind of like steer that conversation.
Yes. And then another one I liked is, what has changed the most in your industry? Either since you started or recently, or if you know about a current event that might have impacted their industry. And be like,
hello, supply chain.
Yeah,
COVID, like that has
one.
affected almost everyone.
Yep.
So that's a great way to kind of just, how has COVID affected you guys the last few years? How have the supply chain issues been affecting you? How are you guys coming through that? Like, you don't have to know anything. I mean, I feel like we are all now somewhat knowledgeable about the fact that there's supply chain problems, and we kind of know what that means. And everybody likes to talk about that because it's hurt everyone.
I ordered a microwave weeks ago, and I still don't have it because of the supply chain. It's a microwave. Come on.
I ordered my dog a
I thought you were going to say I ordered my dog. Hard stop. No. I was like, you have him.
I ordered him a sweatshirt about 2 months ago, and it hasn't come yet. And I don't know when it's coming.
It's almost warm season.
But they're not going to charge me until it ships. So.
Oh, that's not bad.
I know. What are we going to do? Maybe it'll be here by next football season.
Crank
it's a
the
University
AC
of Alabama hoodie.
Stop. Roll Tide, Indy. We love Shannon's dog. Another question that you can ask is, I don't know. Okay, this one's all right. How did you hear about this event, right?
I like to ask, or if it's a conference, have you been to this conference before?
I like that one better. I like
Is this
that
your first time
better.
at this event?
Like, how did you hear about it? To me, seems like a after event survey, right? Doesn't it? Like, so how'd you hear about this? Like, it seems like you're garnering
have
intel.
You come to this before?
Yeah, have you been here before? Have you been somewhere similar? Oh, is this your first time at a conference or whatever? So something along those lines. Also, I like this one. This is kind of back to culture. What type of team building does your company do?
This one, just talking about culture.
I do. But this one, I do feel like you can't just ask out of the box. Like, hey, I'm Grace. Nice to meet you. What kind of team building? Like, that seems so weird. So I do want to say that you might want to finesse this one and pair this one with the culture question. Because I think culture you can ask a little bit more straightforwardly.
Well, one thing that I like, it's kind of a similar vein, is like, so what is your team like? How many people are on your team? You know, or if I'm talking to somebody that's, you know, maybe more equivalent to me, where they're kind of in the same, you know, level of their careers. Like what, you know, how'd you get to where you are? Like, has your team been growing or shrinking or, you know?
Yeah.
I also like to know sometimes if I'm talking to somebody who's way higher up than me, be like, so what is your, you know, smaller team like? You know, it's like, what is your content marketing team like? What is your accounting department like? Like, if there's something that is relevant to my job, I just like to hear like how other companies work. It's like peeking inside their house to see what they're doing.
We just want all the hot goss. Tell us the hot goss. Spell the tea. Another question, or a couple questions that you can ask. These are a little bit more when you've been speaking for a little bit and you've kind of established a rapport.
What's your social security number?
What is your birth date and your mother's maiden name? No, where do you see your career 5 years from now? Like, to me, that's a very job interview question. So you don't have to go with a solid 5 years, right? But like, well, you know, where do you see yourself going next?
Where are you going next? What are you doing?
What's next for Shannon, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a couple questions.
It's also a good way to kind of, like you said, after you've been talking to it for a while, kind of to start drawing things to a close.
Yeah, there you go.
So what are you looking, what's next for you, you know, and here's my card and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's a good way to close it out.
Yeah, I agree. I love this one. What's your favorite book, right? Either so, and this can have a couple variations like, oh, are you reading anything good right now?
Yeah.
You know, maybe they're talking about professional development, or you can bring up professional development. And it's like, yeah, I really like to read. Are you reading anything good right now? Or maybe, you know, I'm struggling to get into reading. What do you suggest? Or, you know, something like, what book do you always recommend? What's your favorite book to recommend to people in our field? Or, you know, any kind of
I think
variation.
If you are in certain industries, there's Twitter circles or LinkedIn circles that are very active, and be like, so are you on Twitter? I think this, again, you have to know your industry, but like people that are higher up in education, that's a huge like subculture of Twitter, or like marketing Twitter, or like, you know, so you could ask like, so do you, you know, are you part of those groups, and what's your handle? I'd love to follow you, like that kind of a thing.
Social media is such a good conversation piece, honestly. I'm glad that you brought that up, because I do feel like, oh, can I find you on LinkedIn? Oh, can I find you? That kind of that kind of insinuates I would like to connect with you without being like, may I have your phone number?
Absolutely.
Like, that's a little much.
Absolutely.
So, I don't know, unless you guys have really connected to your thing. But to each their own. And then another question that we suggested in the blog post that I kind of love, but I also feel like you really have to read the room for this one, is, what did you want to be when you were a kid? Like, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think you could say this as, did you always want to
there's a better way to phrase
be what you are. Like,
oh no, then what did you want to be? You know?
Yeah.
And that, it kind of leads the way to like more lighthearted conversations, because like I would be like, oh, I want to be a veterinarian and an astronaut in space, like at the same time. And then like, haha, that's so silly. And then you can kind of talk and it gets a little more lighthearted. So, but yeah, I think the way, Shannon, that you said it, like just coming out cold and being like, what did you want to be when you were up? Might be a little weird.
Like, read the room on all these. I think this is a really good question if they work in a field you know nothing about.
Yeah.
You know, like, did you always want to be, you know, a genetic scientist? Like,
I'm like, so what does a genetic scientist even do? That's crazy. And we don't say that's crazy. Well, I
oh
don't know.
my
I feel
God,
like you could.
I'm such a silly girl.
Yeah, I know. That's kind of verging into silly girl territory. I can't help it. I'm always such a silly girl. You know me. That's crazy. So let's talk about how to build these, you know, we talked about networking as a soft skill. So those are a couple questions you can ask. And also, there are some little like exercises that you can do at your house that seem a little cheesy, but they can be helpful if you're nervous.
I have homework.
You have homework. Are you ready for your, please do these, actually. I kind of love the idea of you doing these. So we've talked about this before with other things with building confidence, but basically practicing a few talking points is never a bad idea, right?
I do that.
Yeah,
I do that. I told you I do that in my car.
In your car, that's right. I remember that. So yeah, whether it's like in your car, some people do it in front of a mirror so they can get an idea of what they look like when they speak. I hate that. I never like doing anything in front of a mirror.
I don't do it in the mirror.
My face when it's in a mirror looks different than I'm used to, you know? Yeah, and I'm like, ugh, gross, little monster. But you can do it in your car, in your shower. You can do it with a friend if you're like, look, I just want to, does this sound natural? How does this question sound, you know? Obviously, don't overthink it.
I think it's just good to talk through a few things. Like, so what do you do? And kind of practice answers to very common questions. Like, what's your role? What does your company do? Where do you work? You know, so sometimes it can be really hard. I think especially companies like us where it's kind of hard to explain what we do to people, even though it seems so simple, right? So kind of practicing a couple sentence response to those very common questions is a really good way to prep so you don't feel like you're on a stumbling block when you first start these conversations with people.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the idea isn't to memorize your answers. The idea is that you've already answered this before. So it's not ripping off the Band-Aid
it's
when
like
you're
riding
at the
a bike.
event. Yeah, exactly. Like, I've already answered this. I did a pretty good job alone in my car, in my shower, with my friend, whatever. So now you feel a little more confident. So another thing that you can do to get ready for networking is to be cognizant of your body language. So when I say that, again, I don't want you to get in your own head and start to like panic about how you stand and things. But there are a couple of universal signs that are like, that show that you're not paying attention that I think we're all kind of guilty of doing without meaning to. I am a chronic arm crosser. I cross my arms.
I never noticed that.
Oh my gosh. Especially when I'm nervous.
Is it because you're so cognizant of it?
It's because I'm probably. But honestly, when I'm nervous or when that we've all had that feeling of like, I don't know what to do with my hands, where you suddenly become hyper aware of how your arms are just hanging at your sides and you're like, I look like an idiot.
I fix my clothes too much,
which
comes across as very anxious.
Yeah, fidgety. Yeah, which it probably is, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm a hair toucher. Like I constantly am like touching my hair.
I do that,
and that's an anxiety thing. So the more anxious I am, the more I touch my hair. And then to try to stop touching my hair, I cross my arms.
Yeah.
And crossing your arms is kind of a signal. It's closed off body language, right?
Yes.
It's kind of communicating like, I am not open to you. And we're not going to go too deep down this rabbit hole, but a lot of communication is nonverbal, right?
Yes.
So when you're communicating with somebody else, yes, you guys are speaking and having a conversation, but your facial expression, the way your body is positioned, the way your hands, where your hands are.
Your eye contact.
All these things are also having a conversation on their own.
Yes.
And so I would just say, be a little bit aware of that.
Yes.
I don't want to make anyone too aware.
Well, no, I think this is important, So for instance, I went to a conference by myself last fall, and I was very anxious about going to this. I have big imposter syndrome, But one thing that I really noticed, there were tables that I would go sit at where I felt like this is going to be good. I'm going to talk to these people, and tables I would sit at where I was like, why did I sit at this table? Because if somebody is looking at their phone the entire time, nervous habit, maybe they're working, but honestly, probably a nervous habit. They're kind of closed off. They're not really looking at you. They're kind of turned away from the table. Obviously, they're in their own space. That's cool. But like, are you doing that? And then you're upset that people aren't talking to you? Yeah. So I think there's something to like going to a table, asking, hey, is anybody sitting here? Sitting down, looking up at them, making eye contact, smiling at them, like seeing if that just prompts a, hey, how are you doing? And then you start talking as opposed to just sitting down, being quiet, looking at your phone. Like that's not open body language.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Being cognizant of being aware of what signals you're also sending out. Also, we do a lot of things like when we're relaxed, when we're socializing with friends, like rolling our eyes or kind of like scoffing or, teasing.
Yeah.
All those things that there really isn't a place for in a professional networking capacity unless you want to come across as dismissive. I'm thinking of one person in particular, Shannon, you know this person too, who we worked with in the last 6 months, who she did all of these things. And it really kind of, I want to like her. And it really has had a negative impact on our working relationship.
Yeah.
Like just very dismissive, rolled eyes a lot. Also talked bad about other people in a professional capacity to me. So I was like, okay, if you're talking bad about these people, you're probably, talking about me. And so anyway, there are a lot of things that you can do where you can maybe feel too comfortable.
Yes.
So I would say, remember that this is a professional event. So try to keep like eye rolling, teasing, laughing, not laughing. You can laugh.
And I think what you just hit on a good one too, like bad mouthing.
Yes.
Where you work or the people you work with or pretty much anybody.
Or other companies.
Or other companies.
You don't know who other people know.
That's
if you're
not
meeting
good.
somebody for the first time and you start to pile on another company, we don't know that they're not a vendor or a client or a friend, like that's just kind of dicey territory. I mean, that's just good socializing in general. Don't talk crap about people.
I think this can be tough sometimes if there's somebody that like you and everybody in your circles know that this person is terrible and you just assume everybody knows that and thinks that. And so you make a comment to a new person. Yikes.
Yes. Be very
I have
careful with
done that in the past and that was a mistake.
Yeah, that can be a bridge burner. So again, there's like some basic things too that, when you're trying to present yourself as a confident professional, which is the whole goal of this, you want to put your shoulders back, right? Shoulders high.
I'm sitting up straight
I know,
now.
I saw that. I'm doing it too. Shoulders high, chin up, eye contact, all that good stuff. Just kind of those basics. You were talking about sitting at a table and feeling really intimidated. There was this one surreal evening of my life that I've told you about that was like the weirdest moment of my whole life, where I went to this writing conference. It was this creative writing conference, and Joyce Carol Oates was there.
Right.
And you talked about sitting at tables where you're in way over your head.
Yes.
So I won a scholarship to go to this conference, and I had to accept an award that evening for the scholarship with a couple of other scholarship recipients. And so at one table was the president of the conference, the author of the book Rambo. So I can't remember his name, but he's a big deal.
Yeah.
And then a couple of other people. And I saw the back of one of their heads and I thought, oh, that's one of the other scholarship recipients. I'll go sit at that table. So I sat at that table and the president looked a little confused, but he was like, oh, hi, Grace. And I was like, hi. And I sat down and he said, I'm sorry, this seat is actually taken. Can you scoot down one? And I said, oh, sure, no problem. So I scooted down one. And then I rapidly realized that everybody else at the table was either a very famous author or a family of famous authors.
Yeah.
And the seat that was reserved beside me was for Joyce Carol Oates. And I just want to paint you guys a picture. Everybody's wearing cocktail attire.
Yes.
I did not realize when I packed for this event, it didn't say anywhere on the thing that I needed to bring a cocktail gown. So I'm wearing jeans and a crop top. And I look like a friggin' idiot. And so who comes to sit beside me but Joyce Carol Oates, who is, she's so tiny and wispy and her brain is full of good words. And so I'm sitting at this table and I was trying to be relaxed. I looked so uncomfortable. I saw a picture of me that night. I am like ramrod stiff. My shoulders all tight in. Like my body language is so closed off.
Oh my God.
I look like, do not approach me. Like there's a sign flashing over my head.
I forgot about that story.
I try to forget. And then sometimes I remember it all in vivid detail.
Hey guys, dress for success.
Dress for success. And also if you find yourself, the point of that story being, if you find yourself at a table where you're like, oh my God, I am in over my head. I am a lowly unpublished author and that is Joyce Carol Oates. What you can do is fake it till you make it.
Just
don't sit there and wish you were dead like I did. And then what else I did was as soon as I got my award and I went up to the podium, I did not go back to that table. I ran away. Like I literally
Did you have your stuff?
No, I left it. I had to go back for it. So I botched that situation. Please learn from my mistake.
Just be at the table.
Just be at the table. Engage. You're already there.
Yep.
You know, I was already next to Joyce Carol Oates. That could have been a great opportunity for me to talk to one of my heroes, which I kind of did, but then I fumbled it and I got awkward and I closed back off again. So I would say try to get out of your own head.
I mean, I think that happens to all of us. Like, well, even on a much smaller scale, you know, that's happened to me locally.
Of course.
Where maybe there's this person that everybody knows and you know who this person is and they don't know who you are and you somehow end up in a conversation with them or in a circle with them at some event and then you're like, oh God, I'm so intimidated. Don't be intimidated. I mean, hey, just don't be intimidated.
Just don't be.
But listen, just take advantage of the opportunity, right? Like do some self-talk to yourself about like, well, I'm here now and look at things from their point of view. It's just a person.
Yeah. And they also like... You have as much value as they do, right?
Yeah.
I know that can be hard to think about and we're kind of rolling our eyes. Like to think that I, Grace, have as much value as Joyce Carol Oates is ludicrous. But I do, right? And like you deserve to be there as much as they do, no matter who they are. Even if they're the keynote speaker.
What do you want to know?
Yeah, this is your opportunity. So I would say to the best of your ability, try to get out of your own head, take a deep breath, ground yourself, be like, look, I'm here now. I'm at this table. Maybe this is a little more than I bit off a little more than I feel comfortable chewing, but it's in my mouth now, so let's chew it up. What a metaphor.
Wow.
Don't do like I did.
Nice.
Anyway, so that's just some stuff about body language.
You got this.
You got this. So how do you know where to network or who to network with? I think that's also a big important part of figuring out how to kind of go forward with your networking journey.
Yeah.
Is to determine where you want to focus your time and efforts. And so I would say ask yourself some questions about what kind of events you're looking for. Who are you trying to meet? Are you trying to meet clients? Are you trying to go ahead and get that new job? Are you trying to advance in your career? Are you trying to find a mentor? These are all important things to think about when you're choosing what events to go to. So of course you can look for conferences within your industry. Conferences are a big one, right? Like let me just not skate past that. I think that conferences are kind of, I know that there are specialized networking events.
It's
and
like
that's
the castle
fine.
of networking.
But conferences are like, you'll learn a lot. You'll more organically be able to network because you'll be in kind of seminars or, you know, whatever talks with other people who are there for the same reasons as you are. So I feel like conferences are a really good way to network, right?
Oh, yeah. And they tend to be less cliquey.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas if you go to more local events, more people tend to know each other. But if you go to these bigger events, especially the more niche they are, because you're not going to have a whole team of people from the same company.
Yeah.
You're going to have like probably one, maybe two people from each company. That's a really good, everybody's just there to talk and network and learn.
Mhm.
It's like, that's what it's for.
Yeah. And conferences don't have to be these like big, shiny, expensive travels,
No,
right?
not at all.
You can find local conferences.
Absolutely.
We're in Huntsville, Alabama, and we have been to
There's quite a few here. There's a big marketing event.
Yep.
There's a nonprofit it's like a nonprofit kind of marketing event.
Mhm.
And I'm just thinking marketing, right? There's Design Week, there's Innovate Huntsville, there's, so there's quite a few things just here that would be relevant for us.
And for context, we're not exactly a creative city. Like we're an engineering city. And so if there are that many marketing and creative conferences in our city, I'm sure there are tons more that we don't know about that are more engineering focused. The point of that being, it's kind of no matter where you are and, you could probably find a local-ish conference or marketing conference that would be relevant to your field.
Right.
So yes, of course, those bigger, flashier conferences are well and good. And I think they can be a great investment
if you're
as well.
lucky enough that your boss is paying for you to go to them, go.
Absolutely. Take advantage of that. But I don't want you to get discouraged if you're like, it's not in the budget, I wasn't approved. Yeah. You can find, I think we paid $30 for a ticket to a conference once. Like it wasn't that expensive. So yeah. And then if you find that there is a lack of networking events in your community, make one. Do one.
So I don't know if this is on our list here too, but there's local groups like professional organizations. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of times there'll be professional organizations related to your industry or to your job type,
Yeah.
And you can go to those events. Like we have the PRCA here is the Public Relations Council. And that's a lot of marketing and PR and creatives and stuff like that. And they get together once a month for lunch and there's a speaker and it's networking and it is low key and it's $15 for your food. And that's a really great way to get together people. We also have like Huntsville Young Professionals, the young professional organization. And just to be very clear, they don't cap the age.
No, they don't. They
really don't. Anybody can be there. And it's free and you just go and just talk to people. That's literally what it's for, is just to meet other professionals and hang out. There's nothing to be intimidated by.
And what we've done with the Young Professionals group here in Huntsville is we've actually sponsored some events. So that was kind of a double win for us, because on the one hand, we got to go network with fellow professionals in Huntsville. And also we got some brand recognition out of it. And I think we actually got some leads for our sales team.
Absolutely. We've gotten at least one client out of every one that we've done, which is totally worth it.
Which is great. So these things don't have to be single purpose, right? Like you can kind of fit a lot of things into an event like that. Shannon just did the cutest yawn. You look like a baby deer.
He's sweet.
It's very precious. And also, you don't have to limit yourself to in-person events, right? So this is another thing that I'm not going to go too deep into because I think it's kind of a whole nother podcast. But there are remote networking events. Mm-hmm. You can find all kinds of them online. Obviously, with 2020 to 2020 now, we've had this big shift from people being able to be a little bit more, active virtually, right? Yeah. So we have a lot of virtual meeting rooms and virtual conferences. And people are figuring out how to do things like even networking effectively over Zoom. Yeah. Which before I think we were all kind of like, I don't really know how to do this very well.
They're still not my favorite, but I actually did have to do a couple virtual conferences that I was signed up for in 2020 that either stayed in 2020 and went virtual or moved even out and then we're still virtual. And what they did was they did breakout rooms.
Yeah.
Where that's what it was for, and they would have a moderator to help because it's hard on Zoom. Yep. Anyway, still not my favorite. I much prefer, if I'm going to network online, to do it in Facebook groups,
yes, and
or
a chat
LinkedIn
format.
or things like that. And then I'm not on LinkedIn. I'm not talking one-to-one. I'm talking if you follow people that you like influencers, thought leaders is what they call it if it's a professional influencer. It's a thought leader. But then you can engage in the comment sections of those posts that go viral with other people. That's a great way to connect and talk to people. And the conversation has already been started for you, but there's probably, like I said, Facebook groups in your area. We even started one for our business, but there's quite a few other ones here just in our town.
No, she's totally right. Gone are the days, I think, when you have to be hide the fact that you've met people online.
Yeah.
Two of my best friends I met online writing in Harry Potter writing groups. I'm not embarrassed. Okay, I'm a little embarrassed, but I do feel professionally now, you can meet people and be oh, we met online, we met on LinkedIn, we met whatever. So there is a whole outside of actual structured conferences, what you're saying is completely right. Just go find a Facebook group that's relevant to your field or to your passion or your interest or your small business. And you can find a whole bunch of people who A, probably have really good advice, and B, can just like be kind of sounding boards and connect with you. I mean, a lot of times, especially for entrepreneurs, it can be kind of a solo individual, like a little bit of a lonely journey. And a great way to, solve some of that is to connect with other entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I mean,
if you're small and local.
Depending on what your job is like, I'm thinking of admins and office managers. Like you're often a department of one that like people don't really create things just for you, but there are whole networks online. There's whole like Facebook groups that are so active, that are just for people that are in your role. And one thing I talked about, I don't remember, it was 1 or 2 podcast episodes ago, but I was talking about how important it is to have a professional support system outside of the office.
Yes. Yeah.
So not necessarily a mentor, but people that you can talk to about work and bounce ideas off of. And this networking is a really good way to find those friends.
100%. Yeah. So we're going to wrap this up. We also have on our blog post, we have a professional networking checklist. And it's got such things on it as, do you have your networking questions prepared? Would you like us to assign someone to butter your muffin? I'm just kidding. That's not on the checklist. But, it's just like it's a little checklist to make sure that before you attend your event, virtual or in person, you kind of have everything you need, all your little ducks in a row. So you can check that out in the link below. And thank you guys for listening.
Hey.
I can't wait to see you at our next networking event.
Yay.
I'm talking to our listeners, but also you, Shannon.
I thought that was for me.
I wish I could get all our listeners in one room and network with them.
It would be so much fun.
I think it would be like a few people from our company.
It would be Brad.
And Caitlin, our friend Caitlin, and Melissa maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
And then probably that's it. We're growing. The Standard Office Procedures podcast is presented by Blue Summit Supplies. We're an online office supply store that puts you at the forefront of our focus by offering new career-building resources every single week. Sign up for our newsletter and visit our blog at bluesummitsupplies.com for free downloads, tools, and tips to make your job easier and more fun. All right, guys, so we are back to talk about networking a little bit more, and we have a very special guest. Jeremy Westmoreland of Huntsville Young Professionals Group is here to talk about networking with us. Jeremy, hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. So I was really excited when I found out that you were open to being a guest for this episode because, as our listeners just heard, Shannon and I sometimes kind of are at a loss as to how to even start networking or how to do it effectively. Or like, we know that it has value, but it kind of feels like, just like you were saying off air a moment ago, Jeremy, like when someone's introverted or someone's not really sure how to get started, it can feel overwhelming. And so you just don't do it. And I feel like you have a lot of experience kind of helping professionals get out of their shells and start networking, right?
Yep.
Can you tell me a little bit about that process?
Yeah. So what I kind of advise people whenever they're trying to start networking and get involved in the community and stuff is to find what you're passionate about and find a network surrounded by that and then branch out from that. If it's business, if it's politics, if it's volunteering in the community, whatever your passion is, if you're more passionate about it, you're going to have a lot better results with networking, and you're going to make a lot of friends. You're going to make a lot of good connections who are passionate about the things that you are as well. It's very difficult to, as Huntsville's growing, to establish a footprint and to have a better feel for the community, but the more you get involved in the community and the more you branch out, the easier and easier things become. So you just have to take that first step, and there's plenty of people out there who are willing to bring you into the community if you're interested.
Yeah, and so I'm glad that you mentioned Huntsville. So anyone who's listened to this podcast and who's listened for a while knows that our company is based in Huntsville, Alabama, and we don't often talk too much about our local community, but we're talking about it in this context because our city, just in case you don't know, is growing really rapidly. We're having this massive influx of young professionals, right? Specifically kind of ages 20 to like 35. They're just flocking to Huntsville because of all these new jobs. And so there was maybe, it seems like there were little vacuums where it was like, okay, there's all these young professionals. Now, where do they gather? Where do they hang out? And Jeremy, I think you've done a really good job kind of filling that vacuum with Huntsville Young Professionals, HYP. So anyone who's listening to this, if you are local and you haven't heard of HYP or been to an event, definitely check that out. We'll put some links in the description to make that easier for you. Sometimes we sponsor them. So Jeremy and Blue Summit Supplies.
And we appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great. We've had some good collaborations. So you said one thing that I thought was really important and really interesting is kind of, it almost to me reminds me of dating, right? As an adult, where like the best advice that I've received about when I was sort of dating casually when I was younger was like, if you want to find people who you're going to click with, go out and do things that you like doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Essentially, this is just career dating, right?
Yeah.
You're building on your network, you're building on your career. And it really is true. You know, in your dating world, you find things that you're passionate about so that your partner will also be passionate about those things. They don't have to just tolerate your interests. They actually really enjoy and engage with them. And the same with your networking community. I mean, you know, if you're really passionate about volunteering, you find a community that is focused around volunteering, and it'll be a lot more rewarding than just, you know, simply casually popping in to volunteer. So, you know, as any community, not just Huntsville, grows, there becomes more and more opportunities to do just that. And, you know, if you're passionate about something and you can't find a club or organization for it, or some sort of networking outfit, you know, you can start it yourself, because if you're passionate about it, I guarantee you there's 1,000 other people who are passionate about it as well. Things you wouldn't think, right? Like curling, right? For example, recently curling has become more and more popular in Huntsville, and, you know, deep south, you wouldn't think that curling is a hobby that interests Huntsville, but it's picking up steam, and the community is growing rapidly. And there's a lot of people who are like, I used to do that back in my hometown, and I'm so glad Huntsville's getting that opportunity. So, you know, if you're passionate about something, I guarantee you somebody else is passionate about it as well.
It's a very like, if you build it, they will come reality, right? True. And I'm so glad you brought up curling because I just want to mention this to our listeners who know and love Shannon. She's my co-host on every episode. She has started curling. Guys, it's the best. I saw a video of it. She's shockingly good at it. And I'm like you, I don't know if this is how you felt, Jeremy, but like curling, what a random thing to be happening in Alabama. But like you said, it's really grown. This curling group it's a curling league, has a ton of members. And I'm sure it started, just like you were saying, with one person being like, we don't have curling, but we have an iceplex. Let's start curling. And so it just has happened, which is great.
And sometimes, you know, if you're looking to get just your start in networking, creating your own organization or group is the best way to do it, because then you're a founding member. You have every excuse to talk to people, to engage with people. Like, for example, with Huntsville Young Professionals being the president, you know, I can go up and talk to anyone and have an excuse by saying, "Oh, I'm the president. I'd love to make your acquaintance. You're new, blah blah blah." You know, it gives you an excuse to form that connection, which some people might feel to be too introverted or feel too awkward to have that connection. Now this gives you an excuse.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's good that we're touching a little bit upon introvertedness, right? Or just general shyness or some social anxiety surrounding, you know, it's so easy to make friends when you're in school, or it can be easier because you're kind of thrown in this soup pot with all the other kids and you have stuff in common by default, right? Teachers, classmates, you know, et cetera. Whereas an adult, you really got to kind of seek that stuff out and make those connections yourself. But I do love that you kind of talked about these more outside of the box networking opportunities, because I think sometimes when I think networking, I will mentally pigeonhole it into like very stuffy, like cocktail mixers, you know, like, oh, if I'm networking, I have to go put on a blazer, you know?
Which is not true at all, right?
Yeah.
You know, you can network by joining a kickball league,
exactly.
or you can network by joining a 20s and 30s like social group or something like that. And I think one of the most important things about networking isn't just like your peers, you're the people the same age, the same career level as you. It's also above and below you, right? Networking with executives who can give you career advice, who can point you in the right direction, who a lot of times will have opportunities because they are familiar with you, that they think, hey, this person's a really good candidate. I know them from X, Y, or Z. Let me reach out to them. And then the opposite can happen, right? Like if you're interviewing people who are younger than you, or maybe more junior than you, you will be able to pluck them out and help fill the gaps in your organization from a career standpoint. But you can mentor them personally. You can, if you're working with people who are older than you, you can use them as an example for your career and the do's and don'ts and all that kind of stuff. So one piece of advice I would say is, don't just network of your same career level and your peer level. Like branch out and get above, below. I feel like that is very beneficial in a lot of the points that people overlook.
No, I think that's a great point. And I just think kind of, so holistically looking at all of this, you know, I'm so glad that you brought up like curling and kickball, because if you're somebody who, like you were thinking like I was, and you're like, I just don't like networking, but you do like going to these other things, or maybe you have this interest in like swing dancing or knitting. We have some knitting clubs locally, like out of the Low Mill, which is a big arts kind of complex area in our city. But the people that you organically meet and these connections that you organically make, like you never know whose like nephew's cousin could potentially
Very
be
true.
like, yeah, right. Oh, I know about this girl that I met through knitting club and she actually is looking for a job and she has a marketing background. Oh, you want a marketer? That's great. And maybe it was this older lady who you thought never saw this going, you know, in any kind of professional, helpful direction. She's just this lady that you met at knitting and you love her. And it turns into this career opportunity.
That is exactly what happened in my current role. I work at Dynetics, and I did Leadership Greater Huntsville's Connect program, which is their YP program. And a guy I met there from Dynetics he asked me what I did, and I told him, and he said, are you interested in coming to work at Dynetics? And one thing led to another, and that's how I got a job at Dynetics. So that is so true that opportunities aren't just apparent. A lot of times they're sprung on you. A lot of times they come out of nowhere. And if you're not putting yourself in those situations and those positions that put you in front of those opportunities, no one's going to come and knock on your door to give you a job or give you an opportunity. So that's something that I think that is crucially important about networking is seeing it as a time investment to better yourself, to better your career, to learn. I think a lot of people want to network in order to get ahead, but they're overlooking the learning aspect of it. So I think those are very important points.
So I think that you just made the differentiation between like the kind of like skeevy networking that I think we sometimes associate with like, I saw the TV show Entourage when I was like a teenager. Remember that show? And they were so like oily and like ugh and just disingenuous. And so I always thought of like when I think networking, I think of like a group of like just like, you know, ladder climbers who don't really care about each other. And that's the very Hollywood, not realistic version of networking that I guess you could fall into if you're kind of trying to do that. But in general, most networking is this stuff where you're doing a thing that you enjoy and these connections happen out and like just spring out of it naturally. And even if you're not, you know, even if it's not, you know, a hobby, right? Maybe it's not curling. Maybe it is like an HYP networking event, Huntsville Young Professionals networking event. The whole purpose of the event is to network professionally. You can still go and have a good time. You usually have them at, I mean, we hosted one together at a brewery, right?
Yep.
2 breweries, didn't we?
Yep.
Yeah.
We have them all over the city, right? And the reason why we do that is because, you know, some people are not familiar with each part of the city, and that helps expose them to Huntsville. And I think that's a key point about networking is getting out of your comfort zone, trying new things. We don't just have happy hours. We also have hiking events, sporting events. We have professional development in terms of like learning to code or buying a house or understanding how to invest your money. You know, we have board game nights. We have movie nights. You know, we have all kinds of stuff because people have broad, varied interests that they're not necessarily just pigeonholed into one thing. And I think that's important too. Of, you know, we had a lot of people who show up to our events who are like, I didn't know anything about this, but this is a great event. But yeah, it's very difficult for people to get out of their comfort zone. But that's how you learn. That's how you grow as a person.
Yeah.
And so that's why we always encourage people, you know, if we tell people about an event and they're like, well, I don't know anything about that. I don't like that. It's like, hey, that's a great opportunity to learn.
And to come check it out. I do feel like oftentimes we fall into this sort of mental trap of thinking like certain people are really lucky, right? The word lucky is thrown out a lot. And Shannon and I talk a lot about soft skills on this podcast. We actually talked about it earlier in this episode, how certain times we will think like, oh, I'm just not a confident person. Oh, I'm just not good at public speaking. And these are all things that you can learn. These are soft skills that you could become more confident. You can become a good public speaker. And I think similarly, when it comes to opportunities, I think it's very easy to get kind of down on ourselves and think like, oh, you know, we all have that classmate whose dad owns the company and they get, you know, whatever, they get tons of promotions. And by the time they're 30, they're like the president of the company. And it's easy to kind of roll your eyes at that and be like, well, I could never get ahead like that because they're lucky and I'm not. But I think the reality of the situation that so many of us overlook is that lucky people, luck finds you when you go out into the world. Like the more open you are and the more present you are in your community and in these events, the more opportunities you're providing for something lucky to happen to you, right?
Yeah, I definitely think that those are the minority of situations, right? That might be 1 in 100.
Exactly.
That kind of stuff happens. It's much more common that, you know, 2 people start talking and they say, hey, I've always wanted to learn about this. I have a business in that. I have an interest in that. You know, let's talk. Let's collab. Here's my card. Those kind of situations are much, much more likely. But I feel like you said, the persona of networking or the persona of lucky surrounds a lot of networking, right? People think that, oh, you have to be the son of somebody, you have to be
right,
to get ahead, which isn't true. You just have to put yourself out there and get in front of people.
Yeah, and it might take time, right? Like I would say, if you're somebody who's new to networking and you're listening to this episode and you're thinking, okay, I am really interested in curling. I'm going to use that example because I love it. And you're thinking, maybe I'll go to the curling club, but I'm really shy and I'm really nervous. And what if it goes poorly? And what if nobody talks to me? I understand those fears and those anxieties. I feel like it's just like anything else, where the first time you do anything is always the scariest. The first time you public speak, the first time I recorded a podcast, like all these times that I've done these things where you do it and you realize, oh, that wasn't that bad, you know?
At Huntsville Young Professionals, one of our kind of informal mottos is we're awkward so you don't have to be.
I love that.
And so that's why I tell everyone who's on the board of when someone comes in to greet them, because a lot of people are shy and they will stand there. We've had people in the past who have like walked in and like look around and they don't really talk to anybody, just kind of stand there. And we try to make sure that we grab them and bring them into the group. And I think having that support network within, like if you're the leader of the organization, is very important to encourage your members to communicate with each other, to bring everyone in, to make it a family, to make it a cohesive group is very important. Because, if you go to an event and you don't have a good time or you don't feel included, you're a lot less likely to go back. And a lot of times that reinforces those fears that you have. Certain groups, want to try to make sure that they bring everyone in, make them feel like their family. And I think that's very important when you're networking, is to find some place that you really feel comfortable. And that goes back to the passion part of it. Because if you're passionate about something, you'll be able to say, hey, I really do understand what they're talking about.
And it might be a little bit of trial and error, right? I mean, it may not be like a perfect home run on the first try. Maybe you go to an event, you do feel a little awkward and out of place. It doesn't go quote unquote great. Maybe you just feel a little bit like shy and nobody really comes to talk to you. That's fine, right? Don't say networking's not for me and throw the whole thing in the trash. I would say go find, especially if you're in a bigger city where you have probably multiple outfits to, that kind of allow you to network in different ways, to just try something else, right? Wouldn't you? Where it's like, don't give up on it altogether. Just keep trying.
Yeah. If you don't connect with one certain group, whatever city you're in, there's 1,000 different groups who want to foster that sense of community throughout this whole city. So if you don't connect with one, give it a second chance, give it a third chance. If you're still not resonating with it, find something different, or start your own. Right? If it's something you're passionate about, you can always start your own club. Most of the time, they don't see you as a rival club. They'll think, "Oh, this is awesome. We should collaborate. We should work together." And I think that's really, for example, in Huntsville Young Professionals, we try to branch out, try to incorporate all the other groups like Leadership Huntsville, like Rotaract, because we don't see them as competition. We see them as, hey, they're still trying to do the same thing we are, which is foster a community in Huntsville, act as a landing platform for new people who come into Huntsville. And I think that's, in a lot of the bigger cities, that can get lost.
Right.
One of the great things about Huntsville is we still kind of have that small town feel while we're getting the larger amenities. So my advice would be not to give up on it immediately and to keep trying. Because most of the time when you think you don't have a bad experience, it's in your own head.
Right.
You feel like, oh, well, no one talked to me. It's like, but they weren't avoiding you. They weren't going out of the way to make you feel not included. They just didn't know you. And so if you go up and talk to somebody and say, hey, I really like your shirt, my name's so-and-so, that's an easy way to meet new people and feel part of the group.
Yeah. And we have a whole blog post and podcast episode about making small talk. So if that's something that seems daunting to you, to go up to somebody and say, hey, I like your shirt, like I could never do that, we got you covered. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on and making this commercial for Huntsville with me. I feel like we've just talked about how amazing Huntsville is.
Well, Huntsville's a great city, but a lot of the things that we talked about, it can be transferred to any city or any location that you're in. Especially the tips that we gave are even greater, or even stronger in bigger cities. Like if you're in New York, Atlanta, LA, Dallas, wherever you are, the opportunities there are far greater than what 250,000 Huntsville city is. So I would encourage you that even then, multiply all the tips we gave you about like 10 or 20 fold.
You'll find literally anything. And I do think that sometimes, especially for somebody who came from a smaller town and you move to a bigger city, it can feel extra isolating because of how big and overwhelming it is. But just like Jeremy was saying, I think that the key to finding your tribe is to go out and do stuff. Go out and start participating. Join some groups. Put yourself out there. If it doesn't work out the first or second time, don't be discouraged. Just keep trying. You'll find your people.
Yep. There's always opportunities to grow.
Perfect. Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on. Guys, it's been a joy. We'll see you in a week. This has been a Blue Summit Supplies production. Good job, Larry.